Hello and welcome, my name is Crash, and One Piece's sales are amazing. It's the best-selling manga of all time after all, and not only that, it's the best-selling comic book written by a single author, and even in general, it has oversold things like Batman. With over 490 million copies sold, it's hard to imagine that it will be surpassed anytime soon, or so it seemed, until a couple of years ago. One Piece has been at the top of yearly manga sales for a long time. Since the beginning of Oricon in 2018, it consistently ranked number 1, even when Attack on Titan threatened to surpass it in 2014. But its reign of 10 years came to an eventual end when in 2019 a new beast came and rose from the ashes. I'm talking, of course, of Kimetsu no Yaiba, or Demon Slayer, and today we're making all the excuses and try to discuss how exactly that happened. But I think before we answer that, we should answer how One Piece reached the size that it has, because 480 million copies ain't easy to do either. I think the first thing we need to have in mind is One Piece's size. With it currently being 100 volumes, while not the biggest manga of all time, with that amount of volumes, it's no surprise that One Piece ranks among the top 20 best-selling manga. I mean, the second best-selling manga of all time is the longest manga of all time, Go-Go 13, which currently has double the volumes of One Piece. If you look at the top 20 best-selling manga, we can also find Detective Conan, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, Oichimbu, and Hajime no Ippo all standing 100 or more volumes, with Baki just barely missing at number 21. And it makes sense. The more volumes you have, the more volumes your fans buy. If everyone in the world buys the entire collection of One Piece and the entire collection of Fist of the North Star, One Piece will still have 4 times the sales. But that said, we also just mentioned that Go-Go has double the volumes and it's still 190 million copies below One Piece. So that's definitely not all it needs. So let's talk about the time where One Piece got big. I do think One Piece was released during a lucky time. I'm not saying that One Piece would have been cancelled had it been released before or after, but in 1997 Shonen Jump was trying their best to find their new biggest hit. In the years prior to that, Jump saw the ending of Dragon Ball and Slam Dunk, their 2 most profitable manga to date, as well as Yu Yu Hakusho. Their biggest titles at the time consisted of Rurouni Kenshin and JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. 2 big names for sure, but only 2. 1997 would see Jump find a good number of big titles, including Hunter x Hunter, Yu-Gi-Oh! And Ys, but most of them would only be established later on. One Piece had the time to flourish and grow, which it most definitely did, slowly gaining popularity especially during Water 7 and his Lobby's arcs, and reaching the top manga sales in the mid-2000s. It was in 2009 in mid-Marineford that One Piece finally surpassed Dragon Ball and became the best-selling manga of all time, and it's all because of Strong World. Strong World was the 10th One Piece movie, and as such it probably would have boosted the sales as much as its 9 predecessors if it wasn't for 2 major factors. First one is Eiichiro Oda. This was the first time that Oda himself would write the plot, and apparently it was going to be canon. Spoiler alert, it really wasn't, but I honestly remember the fact it was going to be canon to be a big deal back then. And I think the reason why people thought it was canon wasn't just because of Oda, but because it introduced canon things via the second factor, this thing. Oda wrote a one-shot chapter related to the movie that was actually canon to the story. That itself isn't what brought people to the seats. What did was the fact that this chapter would be given for free to everyone that went to see the movie. The movie had a major marketing campaign behind it, so big that all the 56 volumes of One Piece ranked in Oricon's top 200 at the tailgate of 2009. Considering that the movie released in the middle of December, One Piece almost tripled the sales of its previous years just in that year. 2010 would see One Piece break the ceiling once again, breaking the record for most sales in a single year with 32 million. That record wouldn't last long. 2011 would see One Piece reach its peak so far, probably forever, with 37 million sales. From there on out, it decreased, selling around 10 to 15 million copies every year and always maintaining their number 1 spot until we reached 2009 and it was time for new manga to shine. So now that we've kind of established the reason behind One Piece explosion, what's the reason behind Demon Slayers? Sure, One Piece had an explosion of sales after a movie, but at that point the manga was strong for 12 years. The anime for 10, it was already moving to be one of the most successful manga of all time. Demon Slayer, on the other hand, felt like it came out of nowhere, and honestly I feel like that's the reason why it exploded as much as it did. During its first 3 years, Demon Slayer managed to have 3.9 million copies in circulation. Mind you, that's not even sales, just the amount of books that existed to be bought. And honestly, it's not bad, but compared to the numbers we've been talking about, it's nothing. It's enough to be a series that's not going to be cancelled after 20 chapters, but certainly not a manga that's going to beat One Piece in sales. I mean, it's not even close to beating Black Clover. It's an hidden gem, it's something that readers of the magazine can call an underrated battle shonen, but as all manga that are in Weekly Shonen Jump for long enough to not be cancelled, it gets an anime. That's sure to boost its sales a bit, but then ufotable happen. And we're not tricking ourselves here to think that the manga would do great if it wasn't for Ufotable's adaptation. We are not tricking ourselves in thinking that Toei or Poro animated Demon Slayer will still sell as much as it did, because we all know, we all understand that if it wasn't for the animation, for the budget of the anime, it wouldn't have gotten as much attention as it did. And that's the main thing. It's not that other studios wouldn't have done a good job adapting Demon Slayer, it's that they wouldn't have done it in a way that Ufotable did. And episode 19 will most likely not get the attention it actually did. And proof of that is that there's no visible increase in sales when that same scene happened in the manga. Nobody cared until episode 19. And because nobody cared, that meant a lot more new people were turning their heads. Sure, Strong World made a lot of new people buy every single manga of One Piece, but at that point millions of people already had the entire collection, were already fans, and they weren't going to buy it again. With Demon Slayer, virtually nobody had the volumes, and so they bought it. They bought it a lot. 2009 ended with a really good sales number, 12 million to be more precise, which means that Demon Slayer more than tripled its sales in 2019 alone. And that was enough to beat One Piece. And part of the reason is because One Piece sales are not and probably will never go back to being as high as they once were. Why? Well, two reasons. The first one is the same as I mentioned before, the length. Sure, its length means that it will consistently get a good number of sales and it will pile up into a gigantic amount, but as years go by and One Piece gets bigger, less and less new people are going to want to start it. It's too big of a commitment. Sure, there's always going to be people starting to buy the volumes. I started collecting One Piece in 2009, for example, but it's getting more and more likely that we'll ever get a considerable boost of new members into the fanbase. Likewise, most people who are likely to buy One Piece already bought One Piece. They already have collections, and the biggest bulk and certainly the thing that will keep One Piece so high on the Oricon each and every year for the upcoming future is the new volumes. Every time a new volume comes out, people who already have almost 100 volumes in their collections are going to buy the new one. Sure, it's possible that people drop midway, but I don't think it'll be enough for a considerable drop. What is, however, is when the volumes start to be published more sporadically. Oda is not young anymore, and One Piece is cherished, not just by the entire country, but by the company that sells it. And so Oda is taking breaks more and more often these past few years. It takes an average of a break per month. That's around 12 to less chapters per year, and that's just a bit over a volume per year as well. And having one less volume than your competition is something that is noticeable. And that makes these last few years the perfect time for a brand new manga with a brand new anime get that little boost and finally surpass One Piece. But I'm not that interested in just answering how Demon Slayer surpassed One Piece in 2019. No, what I really want to go through in this video is how Demon Slayer managed to break One Piece's 2011 record by more than double, with 2020's sales number reaching a ridiculous, a staggering, a stupid, an absurd number of 82 million copies. One Piece's number were already incredibly high. A best-selling manga in the 2000s would sell about 5 million copies per year, so One Piece was already pushing those boundaries in the next decade. But it was clear to see that the industry as a whole was about to receive a brand new boost in sales. So what caused it? By 2020, the anime had stopped for at least 3 months and the new season wasn't going to start at least till 2021. Was it the movie? Well, I think there's some merit to that theory, but not quite. The movie did push the manga to have a little bit of a boost in sales at the end of the year, but I think the biggest factor was the biggest event of the year. Yes, I'm talking about COVID. Yes. Yeah, the virus. Yes, that COVID. Yeah. And sure, COVID has slowed down the production and shipping of a lot of manga, together with the known paper shortage that put most manga out of stock in recent years. That most definitely makes it harder for manga to sell as much as it potentially could, but the truth is that manga would not be affected at all had the market remained the same. But it did not. Over the past few years, anime and manga saw a huge boost in audience, and that makes sense. Thanks to the pandemic, we've been locked at home for about 2 years, and with all the restrictions to life in general, most people found a lot more free time than they normally would. And so most of them returned to old hobbies or started new ones. This channel is an example of just that. And with many people returning or starting anime and manga, which is the best candidate for them to start with? Well, they might as well start with the biggest hit of last year, an anime that is finished, at least season 1, it's short, the animation is amazing, and a lot of people are watching and talking about it, which means it will automatically have people to connect with over it. And if you're liking it or you're getting into manga, good news, the manga is ending soon, and contrary to all the other battle shonen that you may start with, which the majority of fans do, it's a lot shorter. With 23 volumes, collecting this brand new and popular manga is going to be fairly cheaper than manga like Bleach, Naruto or Dragon Ball, but it's still big enough that it will entertain you for a while you're stuck at home. The quality of the anime and the lack of previous notoriety made it the perfect manga to finally dethrone One Piece in 2019, and that put Demon Slayer in the perfect position to be the manga that will explode with the pandemic. Demon Slayer is often pointed out by other mangaka as the manga that brought a lot of eyes into manga, and while I do have to give it credit, as if it wasn't good enough, it most definitely wouldn't have all the position and would drive a lot of new audience away, the truth is Demon Slayer just was in the right position at the right time. And from there on out, this new audience will turn into other brand new anime and manga, and because more people are into the niche now, a lot more sales are going to come their way, which is exactly what happened in 2021 with titles like Jujutsu Kaisen and Tokyo Revengers. If you look at sales from the 2000s, having passed 4 million sales in a year was amazing, and honestly, it still very much is enough to put you at the bottom of the top 10. But over the years, those numbers have been increasing, and 2021 had 3 manga past the 20 million. I'm really not sure if that's going to stay the norm or if we're going to see a steady decrease as the pandemic reaches its end and free time fades again, but at the very least, I think the golden age of One Piece at the top is definitely over. 2020 saw 2 titles surpassing it, and 2021 saw 5. I don't think One Piece is going to drop out of the top 10, at least while it's still ongoing, but with lesser volumes being published every year, the constant increase of size, I think it's going to be fairly easier for a new manga to sneak past it every year. But there's still literally millions of people buying each and every volume that is released, and I think that's enough to keep One Piece sales still very noticeable in the grand scheme of things. One Piece is slowing down, but it's not dying. With that said, Demon Slayer has sold over 100 million copies in the last 3 years, and even in 2021 it still sold a staggering 29 million. Is then Demon Slayer on the way to finally surpass One Piece in its greatest achievement and become the best-selling manga of all time? No, I personally don't think so. Demon Slayer burst in sales was impressive, but it was still very much a burst, a concentrated explosion. And with the ending right after, with no new volumes coming in the future, Demon Slayer's sales are more likely than not to drop considerably, and it might just happen as soon as this year. Sure, there's still the anime coming out, season 2 just ended, and there's already a season 3 announced, which can bring a new boom to sales, but I don't think it'll be as noticeable as it was with season 1. And you can see exactly that, because while season 2 seems to be regarded as even better than season 1 overall, it really hasn't had the same cultural effect, and especially not in the sales. Kimetsu no Yaiba sales in 2021 were still amazing, but the great majority of those sales were from the first half of the year. And as far as the little information we have of 2022 sales, even though neither are at the top, One Piece is actually a bit above Demon Slayer. Honestly, if there's one current manga that's going to surpass One Piece, it's more likely to be Jujutsu Kaisen, which has even surpassed Demon Slayer's sales in 2021 and continues to be number 1 even in 2022, and it's still going to be an ongoing manga for at least a year and a half. With that said, I don't think it'll be enough. I think One Piece will still be the overall best-selling manga of all time for years to come, but maybe in 2030 something will surpass it. Its reign is likely to not be forever, and that's cool. I personally just want to see what manga manages to do it. If you want to know my opinions on One Piece and Demon Slayer, click on the videos on the screen. The one on the left is my personal love letter to One Piece, and the one on the right is a review of Demon Slayer's manga without the influence of the anime. And if you are still here, thank you very much, and I'll see you next video.